Stanford Law just knocked Yale out of the #1 spot in the US News rankings for the first time since 1990. Yale had held that #1 spot for 36 years straight. And last year, Stanford placed 20th in actual big law hires. Fordham and GW, neither one in the T14, both put more graduates into top firms. And so if you're picking your law school based off the US News rankings, you're picking wrong. Now, I've been coaching law school applicants for 20 years, and the question I get more than any other is this: should I pay full price at a top 14 law school or take the full ride at a lower ranked school? Now, today I'm going to walk you through exactly how I think about this with my students using real numbers from the ABA and the NALP. And I want to tell you about a student of mine who turned down a full ride to pay sticker at a T14, and what happened to her changed how I coach students through this decision. I'll get to her in a few minutes. But first, let's talk about what full price at a top 14 law school actually costs. Columbia is over $88,000 a year. Harvard's over $77,000 a year. Berkeley's $76,000 a year if you're out of state, and that's just tuition, not counting rent or food or books or health insurance. Total cost of attendance at the average law school right now is $82,000 a year. At a private T14 in New York or DC, of course, it's way higher. Law school transparency puts GW's total debt financed cost at $328,000 for 3 years, and Columbia is in the same ballpark. Now, the number most applicants never think about is the interest rate on federal Grad Plus loans being 8.9% right now, and that interest starts building the day the money hits your account, starting day one. And so a student who borrows $130,000 during law school owes over $150,000 before the first payments even due. Now compare that to a full ride at a school ranked 40th or 50th where tuition is zero, and you've still got living expenses, of course, but total debt might be only $60,000 to $80,000 in comparison. And so the gap between these options is $200,000 or more. That is 10 years of loan payments after graduation, and those payments decide whether you take the job you want or the one you have to take. Okay, so everybody who picks the expensive school has the same thought. Big law pays $225,000 to start. I'm going to pay it off. But the math falls apart the second you look at the actual salary data. And this is the part of this talk I'd send to every pre-law student in the country if I could. The NALP tracks starting salaries for every graduating class. And what they show is that law salaries don't follow a bell curve. They split into two groups with almost nothing in the middle. One group earns between $55,000 and $100,000. A little over half of reported salaries land there. The other group earns $225,000, and that's big law. But there's almost nothing in between. The middle barely exists. Now, the median salary for the class of 2024 was $95,000, only counting graduates who got full-time, long-term legal jobs. About 1 in 10 didn't even clear that bar. So the real question is not what big law pays, it's what your actual odds of getting a big law job are. Because if you don't land one, you're probably on the other side of that curve, making $75,000 with $1,800 a month in loan payments. And those odds depend on your school. Top 14 law schools land around 55% big law placement, Penn's around 64%, UVA 71%, Cornell 72%. If you leave the T14, those numbers drop pretty fast. Schools ranked 30th to 50th place somewhere around 10 and 40% into big law. And at those schools, you got to be in the top 15, 20% of your class to have a real shot. At a T14, of course, you could land in the middle and still get an offer. But even at the T14, the big law pipeline is tightening. The NLP's latest data shows the median number of summer associate offers per firm hit a record low, the lowest they have ever tracked. Firms pull back on summer hiring in 2024 and 2025, and that means fewer associate offers coming out the other side. On top of that, the old on-campus interview process is basically dead. Only about 20% of summer associate offers now come through law school interview programs. The rest come through direct applications and early recruiting that starts in the first semester of 1L year, before you've even taken a single final exam. So the assumption that you're going to go to a T14, do on-campus interviewing, and walk into big law is built on a system that doesn't really work that way anymore. The path is still there, of course, but it's narrower than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And if you're borrowing $300,000 because you assume big law is waiting on the other end, you got to know this. Now, I'm not anti-T14. I'm just anti-paying for something you don't need. Of course, there are specific situations where a T14 is the right call, even at full price. If you want big law in New York or DC or Chicago right out of school, a T14 will make that path a lot easier, even as recruiting's changing. Federal clerkships, Chicago places about 28% of its graduates into federal clerkships. Harvard's over 21%, and you're not going to match that at most schools outside the T14. And if we're talking government work at the federal level, policy, academia, credentials matter in those worlds. And if you want public interest, a few T14 schools have loan repayment programs that can make the degree effectively free, like Yale, Harvard, NYU, all have programs like that. If you qualify and you commit to public interest work, they're going to cover your loan payments. And that changes the math completely. But you need to actually want that career, not just like the idea of having the option. Now, the question I always ask my students, do you actually want big law, or do you want to feel like law school is worth it? Because those are different things, and one of them costs $300,000 to chase. If you're going to do that, use that T14 degree to do family law in Charlotte or estate planning in Tampa, you paid for a brand you don't really need. There's no point. Now, a full ride could be a great play, but you've got to check three things. First, does the school place well where you want to practice? Now, most people get lazy here. They see full ride and they stop looking. But a full ride at a school where a big chunk of graduates can't find legal work isn't worth taking. Now, you can go to the ABA required disclosures. The American Bar Association website, every school has to publish their employment data. You want the percentage of graduates in full-time, long-term bar passage required jobs 10 months after graduation. If above 75% of the class is there, you're in decent shape. But if it's below 60%, I don't care, the tuition's free. Those are not good outcomes. Second, does the scholarship have GPA conditions? And that burns people more than you might think. Let's say a school gives you a full ride, but requires a 3.0 or a 3.3 to keep it. Sounds easy, but law school grading curves are going to make it hard, and the ABA tracks this. About 27% of students on conditional scholarships lose some or all of their funding, more than 1 in 4. At 27 law schools, over a third lose their scholarships. There are 6 schools where you're actually more likely to lose the scholarship than to keep it. Major red flag, right? Now, fewer schools do this than they used to. In 2013, 62% of law schools had conditional scholarship programs. Now it's about 29%. But if your school's one of them, you want to look up the retention rate before you sign anything. And third, does the school own its local market? A school ranked 45th nationally might be the #1 pipeline for every firm and government office in its state. And so if you want to practice there, that's going to be worth more than a T14 degree from 1,000 miles away. Now, if the employment data checks out and the scholarships are good, take the money. But there's also a play between full price at T14 and full ride at 50th ranked school that most applicants miss. If you look at the schools ranked 15th through 25th, when you factor in scholarships, they're often the best value in legal education. They give serious merit aid to students who could have gotten into a T14, and their outcomes are close to the bottom end of the T14. Still pretty decent outcomes. Now, if you've got a T14 admit and a full ride at a school somewhere in the 30s, you can use both when you negotiate with schools in the 15 to 25 range. I've seen students get half to 3/4 tuition at schools placing 40 to 50% of students into big law with no conditions. That's often the best move available to you. Now let's come back to the student I mentioned at the top. She had a 170 LSAT score, strong GPA, got into 2 T14 law schools with no money, and also a full ride at a school ranked in the low 30s. She picked the T14, wanted big law, graduated with about $260,000 in debt. She got the big law job, made it 18 months and hated it, wanted to move to a smaller firm, work with clients she really cared about, do some pro bono work on the side, but the debt wouldn't let her. She had $2,200 a month in loan payments and couldn't walk away from a $225,000 a year salary, even though she hated the work. She was locked into a job she picked at the age of 25 with no real sense of what the daily grind would feel like. And she told me she wished she had taken the scholarship because the T14 bought her a credential she didn't end up needing, and it took away the freedom for her to use her degree the way she wanted. And that's not an unusual outcome. The ABA surveyed young lawyers. 40% of graduates with debt put off having children. Over half put off buying a house, and 35% of borrowers who owed more than $200,000 walked away from public service careers they originally wanted because the payments made it impossible. And I've also seen the flip side. Students who took the full ride graduated owing almost nothing and picked the job they actually wanted. Yes, some do earn less than their T14 classmates, but they're able to build wealth faster because there's no debt payments coming out of their paycheck every month for a decade. And they actually like their work, which matters more than most 22-year-olds realize when they're picking a law school. And so if you're facing this decision right now, do the math, pull up the ABA disclosures, run the law school transparency debt numbers, look at the median starting salary for that school, and see how long it takes to break even. And if a scholarship has GPA conditions, look up the retention rate.